Anderson Silva would be a good one to make next if he's able to beat Tito Ortiz in that boxing match, which I think he will. But if you look at the list, you've also got to gauge what's actually possible. Like, the UFC is not going to loan people to Showtime to have them fight. Like, what would the UFC have to gain from loaning one of their top names to Showtime to box against Jake Paul? Like, they gain literally nothing from it. Jake Paul continues to say bad things about Dana White in the UFC. Like that, you can just kind of throw those names out the window. And then if you look at the other names, Gervonta Davis, I mean, you're talking about way different sizes in terms of...
way different
weight classes. Not that would stop Gervonta Davis from taking a fight like that. But I think that if you look at what's actually possible, the Logan Paul one is probably the most interesting out of all of them, honestly. I mean, don't you think if you have the two Paul brothers boxing against one another in a professional bout on Showtime, that would do numbers? I mean, if we're going to talk about what would do numbers, that would do numbers.
It would. I think that's more of a... Now, I've asked them both about it personally, and they've both done the half and half, right? They're like, well, we've talked about it. Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't, and it is in line with them doing these sort of public... Well, how'd they make their name? As YouTubers, social media influencers doing public stunts and wacky stuff. It is the ultimate public stunt. They also hedge those comments with, our parents would hate it. We don't necessarily want that. To me, that would probably be more of a cash out angle for both. When the bubble of celebrity boxing, which is hot right now, let's be honest, because of them, maybe it was old Mike Tyson and Roy Jones that brought in a lot of viewers and got people like Triller thinking, wow, well, this could be a business model. But it's the Pauls that have kept the balloon alive, even though I've been very critical of how the Logan Floyd one ultimately played out from an entertainment factor. I think that's more likely when the bubble bursts. I agree with you in the interim. It's got to be somebody commercially viable, somebody who can be competitive against at where Jake is at in his growth if he keeps winning, and also realistic. You're not going to do those UFC guys. Anderson Silva, especially if he gets by Tito Ortiz, would be a fantastic pick. I think the real question is if Jake Paul keeps winning, Aaron, because every time you interview Jake, he's like, I'm not here to be... That's the difference between Jake and Logan. Logan is like, I'm the YouTube guy who's crashing the boxing party because boxing sucks, and I'm taking your marquee and your money because you guys can't put it together. Jake's the guy who's going, no, I'm a real boxer. So if he goes out there and knocks out Tyron Woodley, I want to know, like, how soon do you put him in there with a real boxer? And is that real boxer going to be an accomplished boxer who's a lot smaller, so you're making a carnival matchup? Or is it, the Kimbo Slice route of going after the washed old guy, put him in there with, like, De La Hoya? Or is it, the younger but not accomplished sort of journeyman guy? It's worth asking, and I know they're putting Tommy Fury, who is Tyson's half-brother and is a celebrity-ish fighter himself who's made a name for himself on British reality TV. How soon do you think we'll be toward the idea of Jake facing like a real boxer?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're a real boxer, you should face boxers, not mixed martial artists and things like that, right? So prove it. Hey, how about this? Put him against Chavez Jr. Well, I mean, if you're going to put him against a boxer and have him build his name, do the same thing that Anderson Silva did. Put him up against Chavez Jr., a guy who's a former champion, who, I mean, is a bit of a joke in boxing circles right now, but hey, he's a guy that has a legitimate boxing record, who has boxed professionally for many years, who's, been a champion, like I mentioned. So, hey, why not make that? Let's see where you're really at. Because if Anderson Silva can beat him, why can't Jake Paul if he's a real boxer? So that's what I'm eager to see. Listen, if Jake Paul wants to be a real boxer, then he should be boxing and working his way up the ladder. Has no interest in being a real boxer. He has an interest in being an attraction, and I think that's fine, and I think that it's good for what it is. I do think that it's a little bit, I'm sure, distressing to boxing enthusiasts like yourself and many in the boxing community that we're talking so much about this guy when there are like great, 5-star boxing matchups like every month that are being completely overlooked for something like this. It's the reality of the situation. Hey, I understand. But listen, I think over time it's going to eventually get exhausting to keep talking about this guy. But if he keeps winning, we're going to have to do it.
Well, as I've said many times, if he keeps going for it, so to speak, going in there to try to get the knockout win and risk a knockout loss, like I think will happen in this Woodley fight, and if he keeps winning, the bubble's going to still be there. And, I've been through the hamster wheel of emotions as a boxing purist of I don't want this in my sport. And, obviously Showtime getting involved from a Morning Combat business reality certainly, helped us get in that direction. But I think also it's fun when it's done right. It is different from regular boxing. It can be a separate, different thing. But I don't know. You think they get him in there with Mike Tyson eventually? I mean, there are some crazy matchups you can make that the public would really want. It's interesting. Jake was asked on an interview with MMA Fighting this week about some of the members of his hit list. And again, it's not realistic, but he says of the Diaz brothers, I've had beef with Nate back and forth. I've beat up one of Nate's boys in sparring, and they're unhappy with that. They think they're super tough guys, so let's prove it. Again, not going to happen. He still thinks he's going to one day fight Canelo. Not going to happen, AB. It's not going to happen, all right?
Hey, it might. If he wins like 3 more fights, maybe. If Canelo's willing to do it, it would be big money.
You know, about Usman, he says, what is that? The Camaro? Is he named after a Chevy car? I've got beef with him, too. Not going to do that one. And, of course, surprisingly, Jake had some nice things to say about Conor where, he said, well, mixed with some bad things. He says, Conor's not the same anymore, that's for sure. It's not as interesting as it once was. However, I would still like to beat him up because I would want to freak out in the ring and go crazy and lose his shit, just like he did against Poirier. So none of those are going to happen, but there is a fighter who's technically eligible, who appeared on Morning Combat on Monday, who might have thrown his name or hat in the ring as a potential future Jake Paul opponent. Let's go to the videotape right here. Let's keep it going here. Hey, Jake Paul, who's back next weekend in a Showtime pay-per-view on Sunday night against Tyron Woodley, has put out a hit list. Now, if we can zoom in, Rashad, I'm seeing, Woodley, Canelo, the Diaz's, Kamaru, Timmy Fury, that's supposed to be Tommy, by the way, Conor McGregor, KSI, Gervonta, Logan Paul, question mark. I'm not seeing Sugar Rashad Evans on there. Can we get Ali to get you in the sweepstakes here, Rashad?
What is going on here? You know what it is? Because he knows he'll get his ass whooped, BC. Listen, you can't convince people to want to sign up for an ass whooping.
Oh, shit.
Because he knows it. He knows, listen, he knows this. He knows he'll pay people off on the list. They'll do the fight the way they want it. But he knows it. I'm not going to take a pay. I'm not going to take a dive. And that's what they're avoiding, BC.
Wow.
That's the bigger question.
Come pour a little sugar on yourself, Jake Paul, in the name of love, all right? Okay? Because Rashad's still got it. You can make 185 or 190 easy. You'll be looking jacked. Yeah,
easy. Is that the weight they're fighting at, 190?
Yeah, about that. About one. I think it's 185. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I can do that.
All right. AB, if you were Ali and you were advising Rashad, you stepping up there, that's a good idea at this point.
Yeah, why not? What does Rashad Evans have to lose? It would be a lot of fun. It would keep him busy. We know that he wants to get back in there and he wants to compete. He still has that competitive drive. He looks like he's in phenomenal shape. So, hey, sure, throw that name in the hat. My podcast co-host, Bazooka Joe Valtellini, would also like to box Jake Paul. So lots of people are willing to answer that call if it's made.
All right. There is money to be made. Rashad still thinks, post-licking Toad, Rashad is a new man, he says. So we'll see what happens.
If you had them lick toads before the boxing match, now you're really talking.
Of course, this all the fun and games will be real though when Jake and Tyron touch gloves. It's August 29th. It's next Sunday night, a little bit more than a week out. And if we can throw to that undercard, there's a good mix of real box, of some fun stuff going on there. We've got Tyson Fury's brother, Tommy Fury, stepping up there. Could be a future opponent for Jake Paul if we see that. Also,
you got to mention that he's facing Pretty Boy Anthony Taylor, who's on a 5-fight MMA winning streak. Shout out to Anthony Taylor, one of the good dudes in MMA, and somebody who's bringing a lot of great awareness to mental health issues. So don't just say that Tommy Fury is boxing. You got to say that he's boxing against Anthony Taylor. He's a good dude.
And Taylor's
you should
part
have
of
him
the
on
Jake
MK.
Paul camp.
He's a great guy.
All right, he's part of the Paul camp as well. Amanda Serrano will be on there, so it's a good mix altogether. We'll check that out next week. Let's keep it going here. To close on our big topics of the week, let's go back to the UFC. And this one made a lot of headlines, and I think rightfully so. What a year so far in 2021. You referenced earlier for the UFC. The Q2 earnings statement came out for parent company Endeavor, and part of that call with Ari Emanuel or some of the details related to the UFC. And what we're finding out, Aaron, is that 2021 is the biggest first half financially in UFC history by friggin' far, okay? According to the Q2 report, UFC's revenue increased 70% year over year to $258 million in Q2 in 2021. We know UFC's had some massive years in the past, 2016 with Conor fighting 3 times and Ronda Rousey back and all that. Are you surprised though, given everything that this year, which we still had some COVID issues, we still had a few things going on, has been that massive?
Well, we've had 2 Conor fights. I'm not sure how much of the revenue would be showing up in this report, given that I believe the second Conor fight would have been Q3, like right at the beginning of Q3. So I'm sure that a lot of the ticket sales and things of that nature would have been built into that Q2 result. But I'm not shocked. It seems like they're doing a lot of different things to make money. And even though these events are taking place at the Apex primarily when it comes to the UFC Fight Night cards, you do have to remember that a lot of the Fight Night cards lose money when they travel. And part of the reason why Fight Night goes to all of these different markets is to kind of galvanize those markets, bring in new fans, get people to see the product for the first time, and they're willing to take the financial risk to have them go to all of these different markets. Whereas the Apex is kind of, there's not a lot of overhead for those events. And they still do the ratings, they still get a certain amount of money from the rights holders for each of those particular events. So that's already a good way to make money. And then, of course, you've got the Conor factor. You're starting to bring the events back to arenas, live events for the first time in some time, and they're all selling out at high ticket prices, breaking gate records. So I'm not overly surprised at this. That being said, has there been financial disclosures for previous quarters from previous years, right? Like, what are we comparing this to?
Well, we would have to call up John S. Nash, who I'm currently feuding with over Twitter.
So you want me to call him, is what you're saying?
Yeah, you're going to have to call. By the way, what is John
Nash
hiding for him to be this aggressive to show the UFC's numbers? What are you hiding, John Nash? All right,
John Nash does have a beautiful mind, so I mean, we do have to go by his numbers.
All right. So what's interesting, obviously, with this boom for the UFC, and look, it's great. It's great for you and I professionally, obviously, in Morning Combat and TSN and CBS Sports and Showtime and all that. When UFC's flourishing like this, a rising tide raises all the ships. That's why every time Conor fights, right, the money gets spent. We get to do the full boat and the full show on the road. Is obviously how this offsets the very hot topic, which is fighter pay. And playing in a timely fashion here is Cyril Gane, your interim UFC heavyweight champion, unbeaten, fresh off of that breakthrough victory over Derek Lewis, the stoppage win at UFC 264, told a French outlet that he earned just $350,000 for that main event. And after taxes and paying his coaches, will take home just $188,000. Aaron, this is a headlining, undefeated fighter in a UFC pay-per-view in a championship fight, and he's taken home less than $200,000. I mean, it's nothing new. We've done this debate a million times. No one's here to say fighter pay is on par. It's great, but it's extra damning when the UFC comes out with 70% increase year over year, and you got this unbeaten guy who is just making ends meet. Now, that's an exaggeration, but you get what I'm saying there. Will this get fixed anytime soon? How many more positive headlines can we keep having? How many more times can Dana White go, I can't bump the bonuses up to $75K. It would, quote, fuck up our budget. Dude, your budget's on fire right now. I'm kind of interested in picking your brain because Luke and I talk about this ad nauseum. We both agree that for fighters to get paid, there's going to be a back end to that. And it's the fact that, we as fans and journalists thrive on the great matchups because of the lower fighter pay to a great degree and the way you can force people into matchups. Do you see a change anytime soon? How many more of these big-time headlines can John Nash put out there before Dana and company have to adjust?
I don't see it changing anytime soon, and I know Luke has said this many times. It's kind of in the fighter's hands. We can talk about this as much as we want, but ultimately we're not the ones that are coming up with the contract. We're not the ones signing the contracts, and we're also not the ones that can do something to get a collective bargaining situation by unionizing. So as much as we want to talk about it, and if we want to criticize it, we can criticize it until the cows come home and all of that. But at the same time, it's kind of in the fighters' hands, and it's in the hands of their managers. So it's hard for us to continuously go to bat for them in this regard when we really have no power over this situation, and we're not the ones that should have any power over this situation. We have the power of the pen, and that's about it. And another thing that we have to look at is, if you look at the financial disclosures from Endeavor, the company still reported a net loss of $320 million approximately, regardless of the UFC's success. And we have to keep in mind that while the UFC is doing well, the parent company Endeavor needs to do well on top of that. And in the midst of a pandemic, and we still have a lot of moving parts when it comes to talent management and live events and all of the different things that Endeavor are in the business of, a lot of that has to be kept in mind when we look at this kind of thing. And even though people say, hey, $75,000 versus $50,000 isn't going to break the budget, you're still allotting an additional $100,000 to an event that you didn't have allotted before. And even though, people will laugh and say, well, it's going to mess up our budget, the budget is still the budget. If you're on the business end of things, that's not something that really gets adjusted on the fly, except, in certain circumstances. And while, I'm not trying to go to bat for the UFC here, but these are just little factors that people do need to take into account. And we also need to stop looking at the UFC as a sports league. It's not a sports league, it's a promotional business. And when you're in the promotional business, you have to almost look at it as if you're a concert promoter, or as if you're, again, in the live events business, not a sports business. We don't have owners of teams. We don't have shares. This is all run by a single entity that has made this sport so gigantic and is bringing in a lot of money, as you mentioned, and as this report mentions. But there are just a lot of little factors that need to be taken into account when it comes to fighter pay that we as people in the media cannot remedy. We can talk about it as much as we'd like, but this is something that's kind of on the fighters and on the management, and if they're unhappy with it, they can do something about it. We can't do anything about it. So we can talk about it till the cows come home. It's a topic that's going to continue as time, for until there is a collective bargaining agreement in place and there is a bigger revenue share. We can keep talking about it. We can talk about how Crypto.com, the fighters aren't getting any of that money, whereas otherwise they would have gotten money when they were getting sponsors on their fight kits. We can mention these things, and it's good to bring light to these situations. There's just not much we can do about it.
Well, I'll give you respect as somebody who gets regular access with Dana White and company. You do ask the hard-hitting questions. You do sort of go after it, and you do make a good point that we can't overlook the endeavor factor. I brought it up to Dana last year that Dana being so ridiculously over the top and brave and brazen to put the train back on the tracks during COVID had to do with the idea of the parent company hurting and needing the money. He said that's bullshit. You don't know what you're talking about. I think it's fairly obvious that it wasn't, right? You know what I mean? I'm sure Dana is just wired that way to not be held back by anything, but there was financial incentive to meet that minimum requirement of that ESPN deal because of how much that fuels the ship. But you do see John Nash tweeting out that UFC 264, the promotion paid out just 10% of the overall gross to the fighters. So until the fighters stand up outside the gates of a pay-per-view and say join arms and say we're not fighting until you bump it up, and even if they did that, AB, Dana's probably got a plane full of fighters who are ready to fly in and take that last-minute picket crossing, opportunity. So
and that's one of the problems, right? Is like fighters are a little bit handcuffed in this situation. You look at the roster and you look at how many of these cards are occupied by fighters that have been on the Contender Series that are making kind of a lower base salary, and it's astronomical. Like if I pull it up here, let me pull up this weekend's card and just go from top to bottom here. You've got, I think Parker Porter was on Contender Series. I don't think he is anymore. But I don't think that he got the contract that way. But Domingo Pilarte did. I think Austin Lingo did. Luis Saldana did. William Knight did. You just look through all of these names, Ignacio Bahamundes, Roosevelt Roberts, all of these different fighters that got their opportunity through Contender Series and are on these kind of entry-level contracts. They can call up anybody who lost in the Contender Series tomorrow. Those guys would jump on a plane and come to Vegas and fight. So it is very difficult for fighters to do this in a way that makes sense. It would have to be the fighters at the top. And I always say, the thing about the UFC is the fighters that are on the undercard or in the prelims aren't the ones that are hurting as much as the fighters that are actually at the top, if you are going to compare it to boxing. Because if you look at boxing cards and the pay structure for a lot of these boxing cards, the opening fights and the first 5-6 fights, these guys are making, 1-1, 2-2 sometimes. They're not making a lot of money. But the people at the very top are making $3-4 million for their fights, millions and millions of dollars, whereas the fighters at the top of the UFC aren't making the amount of money that these big boxers are. But a lot of the fighters that are making 15 and 15 to be the first fight on a Fight Pass prelim, they're actually doing okay if you're going to compare it to boxing. So these are the kind of things you do have to look at, the economics of the sport. I think it's going to take all of the fighters at the very top to bring everybody together. And unless they're
not going to take Bjorn Rebney, okay? We don't need Bjorn Rebney, but we do need some form.
But look at that. But think about that, though. Think about that situation. Think about, you got TJ Dillashaw who's at the top of his game. You got Cain Velasquez at the top of the game. GSP. You've got all these big names coming together.
Company man, Cowboy. They tried, but then they stopped. So,
Well, how long did it last? You had Bjorn Rebney. You had a powerhouse. You had all of these lawyers on hand, on board to try to help do this. It lasted like 3 days.
It lasted as long as that press conference.
And that's with the biggest names in the sport.
Look, we can't fix it, but we can continue to announce the facts, and that's what we did here. To close sort of the news of the week, happy 34th birthday today to the great Joanna Jędrzejczyk, former strawweight champion, the champion of our heart. Normally, I'm not allowed to applaud her with praise on this show because sometimes Luke is a curmudgeon. But JJ, come on, you want a champion? Okay, we love you here. AB, to close out, you wanted to bring up that the Tough 29 season has come to a close. Luke and I, full disclosure, have not been following it, but you can. What can you tell us about the fighters? I know there's this one fella who continues to get some close-up, Ricky Tercios.
Mm-hmm.
That guy looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're not seeing a lot of people talk about Tough, but I really enjoy the show. I continue to watch every season. I'm not a big fan of reality TV in general, but I do like watching Tough every single week because you get to learn about these stories and really get a good feel for these fighters early on in their career, what they're all about, and learn more about their backstories. And I really enjoy that part of it. And while the Contender Series does that to an extent, when I spoke to Dana White, a couple months ago when Tough was relaunching, I said, Tough is kind of like your craft burger. You can go to a burger joint and you get custom toppings. You can get them to cook it well done or whatever, or medium rare. You can really customize it, and you get to learn the full story of the burger. Whereas the Contender Series is kind of a conveyor belt. You're getting your burgers out to people. You got your standard cheeseburger. You got your Big Macs. That's what the Contender Series is compared to Tough. I kind of like Tough for that reason. You kind of get to really learn about these guys. And you mentioned Ricky Tercios. When I first started watching the season, I'm not looking for people to cheer for because I'm in media, but I just really liked his energy that he brought to the show. I liked his attitude. He was kind of a later pick, and I know Ortega's team were kind of like, this guy's kind of a weirdo. I don't know if we would draft him, and Volkanovski's team did draft him, and I think that it ended up paying off for them because he's just a really enigmatic guy. And then on the other side of things, you got Brady Heestand, I believe is his name, and he's a guy that trained with Michael Chiesa. And if you look at his record before he came to the UFC, let's just say he fought a lot of guys that have bad records, guys that were like 0-4, 1-6, that kind of thing, where you look at it, it's like, how's this guy going to do in the UFC when he gets to the big show? And he's really delivered. This is a guy that Michael Chiesa called the matchmakers and said, I don't ask for a lot of favors, but I'm a guy that won Tough, and I think that this guy's got a really big future. And he ended up being right because now he's in the finals. And you got Gastelum fighting this weekend, the guy who was a last pick in the middleweight division. And now you've got Brian Battle, who's also a last pick in the middleweight division for his team that's going to go to the finals against Tresean Gore. I've just really enjoyed the season. I think that these guys are going to be a lot of fun to watch, and a lot of them will be a lot of fun for the UFC. So
I'm not avoiding it out of any reason, but Tercios has made his way across my radar with some fun highlights. Seems like to be a fun personality, so he has made me want to begin following his story. What about this season of Tough from the standpoint of the coaches? Brian Ortega, the challenger against Alexander Volkanovski. I can't wait to see that fight. I'm sure no one ripped a door off Rampage style, but did we get some juicy moments between them?
Not a ton of them, and I'm not necessarily against that. I do think that it's better to put the focus on the actual contestants rather than on the coaches, but it seems like there is some real beef coming out of that show. It seems like they really can't stand each other now for whatever reason, but that didn't really come through on the actual show itself.
All right. No snake in the grass, no TJ Dillashaw.
No snake in the grass, nothing like that, no. Although Volkanovski pulled off this really odd prank on the show. Like, Ortega kept showing up late, so he filled the locker room up with
He took a dump in the top shelf of the toilet. I've seen it before.
No upper deckers on the season, unfortunately. But he filled up the locker room with clocks, and it was one of the worst pranks you'll ever see.
Yeah, that's gross. That's lame. Okay. Hey, no Luke Thomas this week, so normally on Wednesday we would hit you up with fan submissions, Wheel of Death. I've decided here, as co-host, I don't have a producer credit, of course, to create two special fun segments today for use between BC and AB. So let's keep it rolling. I got a new segment idea right here. We're going to try it out. Here's the premise. Sometimes I come up with hot takes with some crazy thoughts. So I've decided to write them down on paper. 7 of them. Some crazy takes. We'll call the segment Call Me Crazy.
I do that anyways. So whatever. Hey, I'm glad you're not throwing the Wheel of Death on me. I don't want that smoke. But I will call you crazy.
You're not ready for that. You're not prepared for that. So yeah, I'll pitch out an idea here, a thought I've got. And I really want to hear from you, AB, in response. Am I crazy or am I secretly onto something here? Here we go. Number one, speaking of Conor McGregor earlier before and the idea of, hey, maybe will he move up to 170 and fight Kamaru Usman? Call me crazy, Aaron Bronstetter, but I don't believe Conor McGregor will ever fight in the UFC again below 170 pounds. Hear me out real quick. As much as I thought immediately after the third Poirier fight that there was a lot of juice for a fourth one, the more that Conor's kind of exposing himself on Twitter and the different attitudes he's showing, and the more Poirier gets closer to be pushing toward that title shot against Charles Oliveira, Conor's still got to overcome this injury. He's not doing great PR work for himself. I think it's much more likely that he would come back in a, let's say, trilogy situation at welterweight against Nate Diaz, or in some type of rehash of what he had fighting Cowboy Cerrone at welterweight, that I think, whether he's coming back against Usman straight for the title or he's coming back in a fight that's set up for him to win, I really think his future here is at 170. And that's not a future because I think he can compete and win against the elite here. I just think that the window's closing on him competing against the elite at 155. And if he can't be one win away from a title shot or just be dropped in there, it's more likely, in my opinion, that he would close his career in sort of action-friendly fights against equally vulnerable fighters for different reasons. I'm not sure if we ever see him again at lightweight before his eventual full-time move into celebrity boxing. Call me crazy.
You might be onto something there. I mean, I think the one impediment to your crazy idea here is getting one back against Dustin Poirier, because I don't think he's going to want to settle for 170 pounds. I think, if you remember when Diaz beat him, the first time, he demanded that the rematch be at 170 because he wanted to prove that he could do it without any sort of built-in excuse on the Diaz side. And I think that in this situation, it's going to be the same way with Poirier, where if he wants to face Poirier, he wants it to be at 155 so he can prove that he can beat Dustin at that weight class. I think that's really the only barrier of entry to your idea. But otherwise, I think that if you're looking at him wanting to be a champion again, I think that there's going to be a lot more incentive for him to try to become a 3-division champion and go after the 170 pound title. And in order to do that, I think he's going to have to beat some guys at 170 or just jump right in against Kamaru Usman like we talked about earlier, if that's a possibility. So I think you might be onto something there. Again, I do think that the one barrier of entry would be the Poirier rematch.
You know, it'll be interesting. I mean, that is a fight UFC would certainly make a fourth fight. If Poirier's champion at lightweight, obviously they could make it even faster. But even with Poirier talking to going the Nate Diaz level, I could see Conor coming back against Usman, and I could see him going down the road after a loss of, hey, I'll fight Jorge, I'll fight freaking Mike Perry, right? I mean, you never know which way that guy's going to go before he's boxing again and selling more whiskey and on the way out. All right, number 2 on Call Me Crazy. Look, we made some jokes about Canadian MMA, but Ariel Helwani, it did make big headlines this week, leaving ESPN, coming back to Vox and the MMA Hour and all that stuff. But in my opinion of what was left behind of my former company there at ESPN, call me crazy, Aaron, but I think that company dropped the ball huge, not combining Ariel's former dance partners, Daniel Cormier and Chael Sonnen, and putting them together in the aftermath of Ariel's exit. Say what you will about Ariel, he draws a big number. He had a rapport and chemistry with both guys. I just don't think there's an attractive sexiness in DC and RC or Chael and Sedano. I don't think mainstream fans are going to care, and I certainly don't think casual fans want something that's aimed at mainstream fans. Call me crazy, but you wanted fun sound bites and arguments and inside information. DC and Chael seemed like a no-brainer.
I'm not calling you crazy on this one. I don't know why they didn't do that. I don't know if schedules just didn't permit. But I'm willing to let the other shows breathe a little bit. Jorge Sedano is a really solid broadcaster. I think him and Chael will bring the best out of each other. And RC and DC seem to have good chemistry, but I think you're right. I think that the juicier fit would have been those two.
There you go. ESPN obviously has reasons to want to get casual fans as involved as possible, financial reasons. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know. Did DC and Chael not want to work? I don't know. But I think it would have been fun to try out. All right, number 3. After UFC 268 in November, which is aimed to be at Madison Square Garden, New York City, hopefully we can see that. Call me crazy, AB. I'm not sure the UFC will promote another pay-per-view card anywhere but Fight Island, Las Vegas, Houston, and Jacksonville until 2023.
I'm going to call you crazy on that one. I think that they're going to try to find as many different places where they can hold events. You've got so many different concert tours scheduled for the rest of this year, next year. It seems like the arenas are starting to open up a little bit more, even though this pandemic continues to roll on and the numbers continue to get racked up. It's crazy. If you look at the numbers from 2 months ago, from like June on the same date as today, and you compare it with like, in Florida and Texas, that it's amazing how many more cases. And even in Israel, like you look at how many more cases there are in the span of 2 months. It's actually very alarming. But at the same time, these arenas are continuing to open. These tours are continuing to roll on. I think we're going to see the UFC in different spots.
I don't know, AB. We've heard Dana say, "Oh, that's fine. I'll stay in the Apex or go to Fight Island. I don't need this or that."
What about? Hold on. What about?
And
Dallas?
also this.
What about Miami? What about Sunrise, Florida? What about Tampa Bay?
What about Tai Chi Palace? One other thing.
We all love the Tai Chi Palace, but if you're going to go do Tai Chi, that's where you go.
All right. Well, if you think I'm crazy for saying that, then we did see. In fact, Luke Thomas texted to me that the Las Vegas Raiders are now requiring every fan to enter the Death Star to have, immunization, to be vaccinated. So, do you think some of that could force UFC's hand into going to more select areas where they can kind of control the narrative in terms of that?
No, I don't think that they care that much about that. I think that they're going to just go wherever arenas are going to hold these events. I don't think that they've never, I don't know, has Dana White come out and said we're not going to go to any buildings that require masks of our patrons or that require vaccinations? He's never really come out and said that. He just said if you're going to open up and have full capacity, you're going to have full. I mean, if they're going to go to MSG, there's going to be a mask mandate in place. In fact, T-Mobile Arena is probably going to have a mask mandate in place if they do events there going forward. At least at the current time, that's what it would be. So I don't think that that's going to be a barrier of entry for the UFC.
Maybe I'm taking the stereotypical right-winged, aggressive, ultra MMA fighter stance and adopting that on the whole organization and the attitude toward fans probably incorrectly. So we'll see what happens moving forward. All right, Paige Van Sant of BKFC fame, although not in the win column, put out a shared video online that basically said she revealed mental health struggles in the aftermath of her recent bare-knuckle loss to Rachel Ostovich and said, quote, "Everyone expects me to lose, and everyone expects me to fail. And while I certainly have, appreciation for her struggle and don't wish negative online response against her, call me crazy, Aaron, but PVZ is right. More people are openly cheering for her to fail than succeed, and I think it's been that way for a long time. Am I wrong?
Yeah, and it's kind of sad. I think it's emblematic of her having a presence on Instagram and posting pictures. For whatever reason, people don't want her to do that and succeed consecutively, like simultaneously. It doesn't make any sense to me. Listen, she works hard. She's at a good camp at ATT now. Her husband's doing great in Bellator. He's going to get the next title shot in the middleweight division. I don't know why people are rooting for her to fail. I don't know if people could explain why. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'd be happy to see her win. I think that she's competing. I think that she should be lauded for going to bare knuckle coming out of the UFC. They're giving her a lot of money. She wants to win. She's bringing good attention to the events, win or lose. So listen, I understand why she's struggling with her mental health. You have all these people piling on. You're putting all of these months into preparation for this one big event, and you end up losing. It must be really difficult just to do that in general, to put all that much commitment into something, and then you go online, you go on social media, and people are just piling on and calling you a loser. These aren't people that are putting in the same preparation in the gym. These aren't the same people that are putting their lives on the line, or putting their reputations on the line, putting their health on the line, going into a ring or a cage and doing the same thing. It must be very hurtful for her, and I understand why she's going through those kind of mental health struggles. I think even as somebody who covers the sport, there's so much negativity online, and you have to wade through it all and filter through it all and ignore it all. And her following is probably 20, 30 times what mine is, maybe even more.
Yeah.
Probably even more.
Times.
And she puts herself out there on TV in front of a large audience, in front of a live audience, and to lose like that after putting in so much hard work and then have people pile on you, it can't be good for your mental health.
Yeah, and
even if you're the healthiest person in the world.
And I'm certainly not saying the online response is healthy or that it's right. I just think at this point, it's sort of like, anytime you get somebody who has options elsewhere and is actively doing that, meaning Dancing with the Stars, modeling, acting, whatever, people are going to question your commitment and sort of, they want to see you live or die, full-time fighter, all that, so that you're going to get haters. Anytime you're a good-looking person, to be honest, you're going to get a certain amount of people cheering against you and thinking you don't have the substance. So I'm just saying it's sort of like that's the default way it is. You just got to kind of turn off the mentions. I'm not saying it's easy. She does need a win, though, and even BKFC President David Feldman said, yeah, the next one, it's kind of like win or what are we doing moving forward? So
yeah, and I agree with that, and that's fine, and that's how it is in combat sports. But my advice to Paige Van Zandt is just do you, live your best life. Living well is the best revenge, and just keep doing what makes you happy. If fighting is not going to make you happy because people are going to pile on, and you can do other things and you want to do other things, by all means. But if you want to keep doing this as a living, and you want to keep training and working hard and proving people wrong, and that means something to you, then keep doing that. But there's always going to be people that are negative. It's so much easier to be negative online than it is to be positive. The way that I always look at it is when you put something out there, look at the likes. Don't worry about the responses. Don't worry about the negativity. If you think of every like as somebody responding and saying, I like what you just wrote, you'll be a lot happier.
And let's squash all beefs, all right? Luke, embrace Joanna. Me, John S. Nash, you're my brother in this world, all right? I love you, okay? Let's get together sometime and talk about backroom bonuses, okay?
Beautiful mind.
All right,
John
thank
Nash.
you. I'll call off that donk, Damien, our guy from 209, that wild, crazy guy with the MK tat. Leave John Nash alone, all right? Let's end that beef. Okay, keep it going. Number 5 on Call Me Crazy. Look, I come up with crazy ideas when I sit alone at night and stare at the ceiling and fall asleep. How about this idea? An MMA, as unlikely as it could be, an MMA promotional merger between PFL and Bellator would create the biggest competition UFC has faced since the Pride days. Call me crazy. You look at the combination of rosters coming together, the TV connections, the innovations, the seasonal format from PFL, the celebrity investors. I'm wondering if they join forces, not that anyone's calling for that, could that be an even bigger opportunity at making headway than even Strikeforce had with the video game and the Grand Prix and all that just less than a decade ago?
Well, are we pooling resources as well? Because then I'm buying. I mean, you're going to have a lot of clout behind this, and I think that there are such good fighters on both rosters that if you combine them, it could only, what is it? All tides raise all boats. I'm going to mess that quote up.
Rising tides. Yeah.
Rising tides. But I think that's going to be, that would be a good competition for the UFC. I don't know if it would be great competition. I mean, I don't know if you look at the numbers for both of those even combined, if they'd come close. But I
so am I
certainly think
crazy
they have a very
if they
talented
formed
roster.
If they formed a super league, because we do this in pro wrestling circles, we're always like, okay, WWE is the end all, UFC equivalent. But what if this guy and this guy just, New Japan and AEW, could they beat them in the ratings or put out better, could a PFL Bellator, mythological merger, could that have the depth of roster where you're like, they could put together cards that like I have to see, man.
It might, but again, I think it's the brand. I think that the brand is what would rule over, that battle, so to speak. I think the UFC brand is just so big globally that even if you had such great talent on this roster by combining those two, I just don't know if the awareness would be there. There are a lot of people that only know what the UFC is. They don't know. They think that the UFC is MMA, and I think that is something that would have to get broken in order for people to really buy into having a secondary league. I mean, hey, if you're devoting 5 to 6 hours of your week every week to the UFC, are you going to be willing to devote another 5 to 6 hours of your week to another promotion? We are, because we cover the sport. That's our job. But is Joe Public going to be willing to spend 12 hours of their week watching mixed martial arts? I just don't know if the appetite for that much mixed martial arts on a weekly basis would be there. But I do, and I guess the other question is, what are the dream matchups? Like if you're gonna merge those two rosters, other than like Cyborg and Kayla Harrison, what are the matchups that really have you salivating? I think you're gonna have a lot of good matchups, but I don't think that there's that much of a hunger for any one crossover match.
We'll leave that idea on the ceiling. Okay, so far I've given you 5 ideas. You've called 2 crazy. So I'm winning right now. We got 2 to go here. Number 6. Look, with the obvious exception of dipping French fries in mayonnaise, bro, call me crazy, but there's actually no such thing as, quote, Canadian food. There just isn't.
Oh, we got poutine. Poutine is Canadian food. We got fries with gravy and cheese. That's really all you need.
I mean, if I'm a world traveler, if I'm going to Epcot and I'm going to the Canadian section, I'd be like, let me try your cuisine. They're like, here's some ham. We call it bacon. There's no Canadian food, bro, right? And these are my people poutine. I'm coming at.
There's
right?
poutine. I will defend poutine in this. Poutine has already come to Las Vegas. There are poutineries in Florida. Poutine has crossed over.
Poutineries sound like somewhere Robert Kraft would go if they closed down his favorite. Yeah, all right.
Well, okay. If he's a fan of fries and gravy, then that's where he should go.
Well, I'll leave that where it is. All right,
Don't get me fired, BC.
You're damn right he's a fan of that gravy. Yeah, all right. Okay, well, let's see. That one's not crazy. I got one more. Here we go. Final one. Of all active UFC fighters, the one fighter who has the best chance right now at joining what I call my GOAT upper room table, the people that have a case for the greatest of all time. Currently, right now, that's a 6-member table that includes GSP, Anderson Silva, John Jones, Amanda Nunes, Mighty Mouse Johnson, and Fedor. Of all active UFC fighters at the moment who have the best chance of closing their career out at that table, I'm going to go Israel Adesanya. Call me crazy.
Did you mention Khabib in that mix?
Oh, crap, I left him off. Yes, well, he's not active, but he should have been in that mix. Let me get that 7th chair ready and put Khabib
So
on
you're
the
crazy.
corner.
You don't have Khabib on the list.
Yeah, I was crazy right there. But now that we've added Khabib, do you believe of active UFC fighters that Izzy is angling toward having the best chance, or are you more of a Poirier, Usman type of guy?
Well, that's a good question because Usman only has 1 loss. Israel only has 1 loss, and that came up a division. I mean, you might be right on this one. I don't know. It's interesting. And one guy that I think is being wholly ignored in this conversation is Max Holloway. Like, Max Holloway's still, in his 20s? And look at his resume of who he's beaten so far. Like, I think that if you look at the all-time greats, if you give Max Holloway another 7-8 years in the sport, and he can keep racking up numbers, Max Holloway might earn a spot at that table as well. I still think that he has an argument. Had he beaten Poirier on that night in Atlanta, I think that you could certainly make more of a case. But I don't want to write Holloway off because I just think he's done so much in the sport.
I'm not going to write him off because he's so young and he's coming off a performance in which you can argue he looked the best he's ever has. But you made a good point on the Poirier thing. You kind of have to do something extra special to crash that party. I feel like Holloway, who's great, is going to end up in that next tier of Jose Aldo and Randy Couture and those other guys. And I know people hate when I don't put Aldo at the big table, but it kind of is what it is. I feel like right now Adesanya's showing me that he could be that dude. Hey,
we also
Usman
have Francis too. Like if
Usman
Francis
might be that guy.
If Francis ends up knocking out Cyril Gane and knocking out all these guys in the future, I mean, you have to look at him too.
Yeah,
he's got the potential, but I think if you're going to say who has the most potential, yeah, it's either Israel or Usman. I think that it's kind of a toss-up at this point between those two.
What about if Valentina beats Amanda in a proposed 3rd fight? What about?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think you can make that case. She'd be essentially moving up a division and becoming a champion in another division. So I think I think if anybody beats Nunes, they can enter that conversation. They can enter the chat room, so to speak. But yeah, I'd say Usman, Israel. Those are probably the two that have the biggest chance. I mean, Usman hasn't been losing rounds, right? I mean, at least Israel, you had him losing those rounds to Gastelum. He's lost rounds in the past. So kind of a toss-up between those two, I would say.
I just think, I guess I want to say if you say, well, what's the difference between Adesanya and Usman? Well, I think Adesanya's got more high moments so far on the resume. I mean, God, he one punch knocked out Robert Whittaker more or less. But I think he also has the brighter potential to one day move up and grab a title in the 2nd division. Now, you can argue that and say, hey, Usman has been talking about maybe one day going up to middleweight, and what could stop him with that wrestling? We'd have to see it, though. But I think, although we've slowed down the talk of Adesanya like becoming a 3-division champion and going up to heavyweight and looking the same because of how Blachowicz, used his size and smarts to hang on there. I do think the ceiling's brighter, but we'll find it out. Are you in on Ariel's new committed pronunciation of I can't even try it, but
I have been. Yeah, I've been saying it that way for a
no,
long time.
not even Adesanya.
He's going promotion.
No, he's going weirder, and he's going like extra curvaceons and
I think
stressing.
it's actually pronounced Adesanya. Not he puts the pronunciation on Adesanya, but I think it's Adesanya.
See, maybe I'm just ignorant.
Israel would have to verify that. I'm not
maybe
really
I'm just ignorant and lazy, and once I get used to one name, it takes me long enough to learn the first name. I'm probably just an ignorant American. I'm sorry, Aaron.
But hey, shout out to Ariel for at least bringing that into the public perception that it was being pronounced wrong this whole time, and that is the way.
Yeah, Brett tried that for a while too.
Jack,
I think Brett.
Sorry, I tried to do the same thing with Jack Hermansson, which is how you pronounce his last name, Jack Hermansson.
I'm not doing it.
It didn't pick up.
No. I saw Brett trying that at Adesanya for a while, then he pulled back. Brett's still calling the guy Khabib. Hey, Brett, the K's silent, bro, okay? Can you get on board with that? By the way, Joanna called Brett the best-looking journalist in all of MMA. Can we...
She called him that after she did an interview with me, immediately after she did an interview with me, and that's still a sore spot.
Okay, then maybe you should be the one feuding with her, not Luke. All right, let's keep it going
I
here.
said to her, I go, hey, Joanna, I'm right here. She goes, I get to speak to the most handsome journalist. It was right after, and I go, Joanna, come on, I'm right here.
Yeah, it's Joanna, but that's fine too. Maybe that's why. All right, well, let's keep it going. Hope you enjoyed Call Me Crazy. I've got one more inventive segment for AB and I to tickle right now, the fancy of, and this one's going to get nerdy, as you can see behind the great Aaron Bronstetter in his Mississauga home there in near Toronto, outer
Scarborough,
Toronto.
but whatever, you're close.
Hamilton, something like that. Yeah, over his shoulder. I always thought those were like books or comic books or something nerdy. You're my kind of nerdy. You got vinyl for days, brother. You sell it, you buy it, you savor it, you love it. You've counseled me in certain directions, including my changeover and transition into jazz, fusion. I'm even doing some world music lately. I mean, I'm Ginger Baker's taking, Heroin took Ginger Baker into some weird travels. He's taking me to those too. Just, no needles though involved in this. But I wanted to create a fun-loving segment in which you and I get all kinds of nerdy. So I've decided to call it Final Intercourse.
Look at this graphic team.
All right, look at that. Look at that graphic.
Building graphics on the daily.
On like 2 hours notice. We will spin the black circle. This segment is fun and games in which AB and I are just going to share recent records that we're getting down on in our man times alone in the man cave. So AB, you want to go first, or you're the guest?
Sure. Well, listen, summer usually for me gets split into like 4 genres primarily. You got hip hop, you got a little bit of world music, you got some jazz funk. And then you got like punk and like, indie rock punk, that kind of thing. Those are like my 4 genres that really get me going in the summer, as well as some stoner rock. Some stoner rock will get me up in the summer. But number 1, we got Vince Staples. Vince Staples, you got Big Fish Theory. Big Fish Theory is one of my favorite hip hop albums of like the last 10 years. It's a lot of fun. That's actually a nice picture disc. But Vince Staples is one of the best rappers today. I stand by it.
So is
everything he's done? He put out an album this year. It's not his best work, but Big Fish Theory is my favorite Vince Staples output, and I've been really playing that a lot this summer.
People may not know. They may look at you and think classical, but no, this guy gets down in jazz, and you do get down in not only hip hop but new hip hop, which whenever I talk hip hop, it's got to be commercial suburban '90s hip hop. So
like Limp Bizkit.
No, stop that right now, please. How would you describe, is this the kind of rap that hip hop that Luke would listen to? How would you describe to me as a Vince Staples ignorant newbie?
Well, I know that he's like more into Jedi Mind Tricks, Vinnie Paz, that kind of thing. Well, the thing about Vince Staples is like he's kind of like Miles in the fact that he likes to make every album sound different. So like, his first EP had a very different sound from his first album, which was Summertime 06. Summertime 06 is like an 80-minute album that's just like a bunch of different stories about the summer of 06 and his upbringing. And Big Fish Theory is more of a dancey type album, a lot more beats, a lot more electronic influence. And I like that part of that particular album. I just think it's one of the more innovative albums in hip-hop that we've heard in the last 10 years. So you might like Vince Staples. You should check him out.
Good stuff. Well, the thing is, you got me into this music app Tidal, Tidal, for the highest quality. And I've gotten some others into it as well. And I'm constantly sharing recommendations of songs and albums, which is really the glory of this segment, to expose people to new music. So I will add that on the old Tidal app and check it out and get back to you. You should see how nerdy our DMs get. No stick pics. All right, I'll start off with mine on Vinyl Intercourse. I've told you over the DMs that I'm into this. A lot of people know I took a hard turn into all things Cream, the supergroup in the late 60s of psychedelic, blues, rock, all that good stuff, realizing that, no, this is one of the greatest bands of all time, beyond the radio hits, and a big reason. In fact, in that power trio, the one man you can argue who was the most valuable was bassist Jack Bruce, not only one of the greatest bassists of all time, creating that very heavy sound for Cream, which kind of became a template for heavy metal moving forward in some ways. He was also the frontman for as long as the record company would allow, as they were trying to pull a not so ready Eric Clapton to the forefront. One thing about Jack Bruce's bass playing in Cream, though, is it was just very heavy, but it served as a foundation for Clapton is God to go out there and solo over. But after Cream broke up, after just 4 albums, and in the midst of this breakup, Jack Bruce went solo. And here's what's interesting. You could argue that of that trio, Clapton went on to huge fame. Ginger Baker went on to Blind Faith with Clapton, went on to other areas of success. Jack Bruce has had the least amount of public success, but his 1969 solo debut, titled Songs for a Tailor, is, I believe, one of the hidden gems here that has fallen through the cracks in rock history. So even though he had that heavy sound with Cream, Songs for a Tailor sees a Jack Bruce that's basically playing lead bass as if it's guitar and constantly soloing over songs. It's the same songwriter in Pete Brown who's given the weird psychedelic lyrics to the prime Cream albums, including Disraeli Gears, and he's sort of taking you on some of those, hey man, I should be on acid while I listen to this journeys. But the song structures are anything but psychedelic. They're all written by Jack Bruce. And here's what's interesting. It's probably one of the earliest and finest mixes of what became progressive rock, but mixed with a very jazz-sounding foundation there. And certainly Jack Bruce has a folk background, a classical background, and you would need that classical background to really get prog off the ground. But I've been vibing for this one for months, and it's funny that no one talks about it. It doesn't have a ton of radio hits, but it's got some eclectic-sounding grooves with a great backing band, which come from the rhythm section of a band called Colosseum, which had some great success in the fusion space. But this is a jazz, prog, rock sort of tour de force that I think is a very hidden gem under the radar. If you like the Cream sound, but you like sort of other areas, including fusion and such, this is a very good exploration that's worth your time.
Yeah, you told me about this one. I added it to my title list as well. So I still have yet to listen to it. But it's interesting when you hear these kind of super groups branch out, and you kind of get these results that you weren't really that aware of. Like, for example, the Beatles. I mean, we'll dismiss much of Ringo's solo output, but I think that George Harrison, I think his solo output blows Lennon and McCartney's out of the water. I think, like, just All Things Must Pass, I think, is as good as any Beatles album, in my opinion.
It might be that might be the best post-Beatles solo album with respect
I think it is,
to
hands down.
But the problem is, in as much as I love George, he's my favorite Beatle, and I have followed his solo career, the other albums are not as consistently strong as, let's say, Lennon's, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've got my mind set on UBC. We've seen where Harrison went down some dark roads later on in his career.
I like that comeback album, right? That's not a bad one. I like that.
But we do. I think that the albums that were like, immediately following All Things Must Pass were still very good. I still think that he had some good output. McCartney's very hit or miss with his solo output. Definitely. I think Ram is an amazing album that kind of gets overlooked sometimes. But I think that All Things Must Pass is just a legendary work that's as good as anything the Beatles have ever put out, sometimes even better.
But it's wild that nobody talks about Jack Bruce, and he did fall through the cracks because he didn't, let's say, have that solo success from the standpoint of hits. But the bass playing is insane, and Songs for a Tailor was written about the late Cream stylist, costume maker, tailor, whatever you want to call her there, who Jack Bruce secretly had a love affair with, and she wrote him a letter as he was heading into the studio, and he received the letter 2 days after she died, and the letter said, "Sing me some sweet hymns." So he wrote this album and dedicated it to her. So good shit right there.
And
we probably turned off all the fans.
You rarely see bassists kind of go and do their own solo thing also, so kudos to Jack Bruce.
Good shit. What else you got for me here, AB?
All right. You were talking about getting into world music this summer. One of my favorite genres of the summer, of any summer, is Tropicalia from Brazil. Caetano Veloso. This is his self-titled album from 1968. He has several self-titled albums, but this is the one from 1968. Just a psychedelic masterpiece, and really one of the first pioneering albums of the Tropicalia movement from 1960s Brazil. That was a very strong political movement against their government and the oppression of their government. And you look at them, acts like Gilberto Gil, Os Mutantes, or Muchanch, if you want to say it in the Portuguese way. But Caetano Veloso is an absolute star. He's still touring to this day in his late 70s. And I just love that particular album. I love a lot of his early output, but that album, to me, you can put that on any time in the summer, and I'm grooving to it. I love it.
All right, you went down a niche road here, and I'm happy you did. I'm going to add this one as well because I've never heard of him, although this seems to fit where I'm at now. Are you into Fela Kuti? I recently got into him through Ginger Baker. He's from Africa. He's basically like
of course.
Bob Marley-esque with the political connections to the music, but more jazzy. And I've been blown away. And I also just bought Harry Belafonte's Calypso album, which is obviously a known classic. Is this anywhere in that realm, or you're saying this is much more psychedelic?
This is a little bit more psychedelic because it's from late '60s, where the psychedelic movement was really taking over America, and then it kind of trickled over to Brazil, and they put out some really great music at that time with a lot of interesting experimentation with the instruments. I know Os Mutantes were hitting like barrels and all kind of whatever they could find to make a lot of really interesting psychedelic music. So it's a little bit different. I think yours is more like kind of the Afro beat, and I actually bought a Fela Kuti album today, so. It's a very relevant for you to bring up.
This guy AB, all right, let's keep it going here. Here's what I got. So a big part of my vinyl exploration this pandemic has not only been digging into parts of the 1970s I just wasn't aware of, whether you're talking about fusion or I never went down the prog roads, but just finding out that classic rock radio essentially lied to us, often playing or overplaying the one or two hits we would know of a band, forcing you to gain an idea of what that band could be and sort of stereotyping them without really knowing. I'm going to give you a band right there that I've been harping to you over DMs. The freaking Marshall Tucker Band. If you hear the Marshall Tucker Band, you're like, okay, I know their two hits, right? Can't You See and Heard It in a Love Song. Yeah, that's like Southern rock. That's like country rock. It's like Poor Man's Allman Brothers, right? Not really, kind of, but not really. I have been overwhelmingly happy to find out that not only are all the Marshall Tucker albums amazingly cheap online, but that this band is absolutely badass, with Toy Caldwell on lead guitar as the main songwriter, sings a bit, but mostly just playing recklessly fast and out of control boogie, country rock into other genres. What's the key of what makes Marshall Tucker worth your time? It's the fact that ambitiously, Caldwell basically said, I'm going to take a country rock foundation, but take blues, take jazz, take almost the early onset of jam band before that was even a thing, and mix it up into a soup that actually works. And the prime album of their early run is their third one, 1974's Where We All Belong. It doesn't have the radio hits of some of their other albums, but it's their most solid one top to bottom. And key and point is that it's a double LP, the first one being in the studio, which has the lead-off track, This Old Cowboy, which is one of the rare ones that Toy sings lead on, and it's just impressive and amazing. But more importantly has the live album on the second disc, or the second LP, and that shows you what this band can do live. Yes, they utilized a flute player, Jerry Eubanks, who can also play other stringed instruments. They had Charlie Daniels on fiddle, and what this band can do live would blow away what you would believe they are or what they can do. I mean, it is jam bandy, it's jazzy, it sometimes can be heavy. Toy Caldwell is one of those forgotten guitarists, very similar to like Terry Kath with the band Chicago, where nobody's talking about Toy Caldwell at all. And you go back, and here's the unique thing about him, Aaron. Remember when we'd like rent a video game or buy a video game as a kid? You'd never read the instructions. You just grab the game, plug it in, and be like, dude, I'm just going to learn on the fly. This feels like a guitarist who like learned the basics and then was like, F it, I'm just going to go. And he's sloppy, and he's aggressive, and he's loud, and he goes after it. But that sloppiness is the endearing element to the chances he takes and the places he goes. He has a unique style all his own. Marshall Tucker Band freaking rules, and nobody wants to talk about it. In live, they're even more incredible. So if you want to take the plunge, Where We All Belong has that great mix of the blues, the country, the jazz, and really gives you a full flavor of where this band is.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Radio did lie to us. Like they played us all these singles. A lot of it is cheese. And then you go and you listen to the actual full album, and it's like, wow, these guys have something. And it's funny, when you look at collecting records in general, like there's this kind of misnomer that like the expensive records are the ones you want to get. You could build like an awesome starter kit for people for like $80. You can get them like 15 great records to start their, like 15 classic records that they can start their collection with. And you always find these kind of hidden gems in the bins at record stores that are $4 or $5, and there are so many good ones. I mean, I turned you on to Heavy Weather by the Weather Report. You can find that record for like $6, and it's an amazing record. So it's kind of cool that if you want to explore, a lot of these kind of older bands, a lot of these records got reproduced. in such a degree that you can find them for cheap. Elvis Costello, you mentioned off the top of the show, is another one of those artists where you can find his records for $7-8. So
AB,
it's cool.
do you get into that sort of idea of, I guess, what some people call boogie rock, where it's, it's country influenced, but they can, the best part about Marshall Tucker is they take some of these songs and jam them out for no reason, 8-9 minutes, and it doesn't wear you out. It's good, it's great musicianship, and they go a lot of different places with it.
Yeah, you saw a lot of that in the 70s, and again, those are the ones you don't hear on radio because they're too long. They're not the 3 minutes and 19 seconds or whatever that ideal amount of time is that you're supposed to have for a single. So you get to hear that kind of thing when you just take a dive into any album. If you go into one of these, again, record stores, you buy things from $6-7 bin, you find these great albums that are just great top to bottom that people don't really talk about, and I think it's good that you discovered one there.
Start talking about them, okay? Because it's all over my turntable. What do you got? Number 3.
All right, number 3. In the jazz funk vein, here, grab this. This is Stepping Into Tomorrow by Donald Byrd. This is an awesome album. This is the Vinyl Me Please exclusive, pressed at 45 RPM, which is, if you really are an audiophile, you always like seeing records that are recorded in half speed. But Stepping Into Tomorrow is just an incredible jazz funk fusion album that where Donald Byrd, another guy kind of like Miles Davis, that just kept evolving as his career went on, where he was able to really go from hard bop and early jazz in the 50s all the way into the whole jazz funk fusion area, and I think that he did it masterfully. And that's another record you can find for like $10 to $12 if you want to just buy an original pressing or a repress. But I would recommend this one to you. I think I've recommended this one to you in the past, and I don't know if you've gotten into it yet, but Stepping Into Tomorrow is an absolute gem of a record.
I have, and it's fantastic. It was one of the first ones I added on Tidal, and interestingly enough, there's a lot of crossover in 70s fusion jazz. I have gotten into jazz through your influence, but I'm much more a fan of fusion, which is combining jazz and rock together. And what you end up finding is a lot of these guys constantly playing on each other's albums, which is great because a lot of these backing bands become all-star bands. My favorite fusion record I always tell you about is the solo debut of Jaco Pastorius, which has like Herbie Hancock on the keys and has like all across the board just an all-star lineup. When I look at the lineup on this album, I don't know a lot of these names, so for this one to get to that level, this is a very impressive LP.
No, it's just a phenomenal album, and it's great for the summer. It really gets the blood flowing, gets you up and moving. This is a good one.
All right, let's keep it rolling here. Number 3, a lot of people know I'm a big Grateful Dead fan, jam band, and the spin-offs of what the Dead have given us through the years, including the great bluegrass Jerry Garcia influenced "Olden in the Way." If you're not down with that, then come on, what are we talking about here? But this one was a monster surprise for me from Bob Weir, still fronting Dead and Company with my boy Oteil Burbridge on bass, and they just started their new tour. Bob is in his 70s and still going, but his 2016 solo effort, his first solo album since that forgotten one he did in the late 70s. Of course, he did Ace, his debut one, which is fantastic. That second one, Suck the Horn. This one was a shocker. 2016's Blue Mountain. Why? Because it's a double LP, but it is as pure a folk record as you can ever purchase. This is not Grateful Dead style of, bluegrassy, this or that. No, this is straight folk, straight Americana. This is an old man singing songs about rivers, mountains, valleys, and it's inspired, he had a co-writer on it, but it's inspired by a lot of time he spent in his youth in Wyoming on looking at the open fields, and it is a mood album. It just sets a tone. It's a different voice than Bob has used during his Grateful Dead run. I don't typically, although I love me some folk, early Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan, but I'm not a folk guy. I love more of what folk became, when it plugged in, the Byrds and Dylan and what became of that. But this is just pure friggin' folk, and it takes you to a place. And I think when you're a washed dad who's 43 and you got a basement filled with fight photos and you get away from your family for the final 2 hours of the night and you put the headphones on and you plug in, sometimes you just, you want to be taken someplace. Bob Weir takes me to a river on this double LP here, and it's incredible. Shout out to Josh Kaufman, the producer, and it's a very good record, and no one talks about it, so good shit right there.
I missed the Grateful Dead bus because, I've listened to Anthems of the Sun and a lot of the different studio albums, but I know that they're mostly known for their live stuff. I just don't know where to get started. There's so much output from them that it makes it difficult for me to get my feet wet with the Grateful Dead. And there's a lot of other musicians and bands that are like that, where the discographies are so long that I kind of have to pick and choose. I'm like that with Dylan's discography. Like, there are some Dylan albums that I just love, but I just don't know where to get started with a lot of his other output. So it's I just need more time. But we can't. That's the one thing that we can't buy is time.
We can't buy it. We can't buy it on this show either. We're running out.
I wish
of
I could stop time and just listen to every record I wanted.
Does that wrap up your vinyl for the week here?
I think I got one more.
Oh, go shit! Hit me with that. Hit me with it.
All right, we got Car Seat Headrest, Teens of Denial. This is an awesome indie rock album from the last couple years, 2016 in particular. I just love everything that this guy's done, and this particular album is my favorite of his. You know, he doesn't have he had prolific kind of online output where he was just putting out singles after single after single after single. And the reason he was called Car Seat Headrest is because that's where he recorded his songs. He got into the backseat of his car, put his head up against the car seat headrest, and performed.
Love it.
But Will Toledo, since then, the frontman of Car Seat Headrest, has continued to evolve. His last album was pretty good. It didn't do as much for me as Teens of Denial, but that's one that I've just been rocking this summer.
Okay, I've never even heard of this band, and you've got me intrigued by how you sold it. In the indie vein, is it Dad Rocky? Is it Death Cab? Is it Wilco-ish?
No, there's more towards punk, I would say. Like, it's more in that vein.
Okay. I'll give it a spin, man. A little dashboardy? No dashboard on that? No.
What is that? Love with the Dashboard Light? Was that the Meatloaf song?
No, I was talking about Dashboard Confessional, but you were right on there. All right, let me close with this. My great vinyl exploration has obviously gone into deep on Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young at times, and just how incredible that supergroup is. But what people tend to forget is how little studio albums they actually put out. They would break up a lot, they get in arguments, and then you had the solo breakouts. And, you know, David Crosby and Graham Nash put together a bunch of very good solo albums that felt like Crosby, Stills, and Nash records and sort of fall in that lineage. One time, though, former Buffalo Springfield members and CSNY alums Stephen Stills and Neil Young got together for 1976's Long May You Run. And this is one of those rare albums that I want to put to the forefront and just say, I think the ratings board gets it wrong. You go to sites like allmusic.com and they'll tell you, 3-star album, forgettable. It came off the heels of a broken attempt at reuniting Crosby, Stills, and Nash for big money. There were arguments, so Stills and Young went into the studio. Young kind of carried the songwriting, but not only is Long May You Run my favorite Neil Young song and sort of one of those Bob Dylan Forever Young type of sort of seminal songs that you look deep within yourself as you age and look back on your life, even though he wrote it about a car, which sadly kind of takes away the charm of it. But it's got one of those romanticized feels. The whole album has that. Yes, it's got some of that mid-1970s Southern California Eagles country rock Laurel Canyon thing going, but it is a very good album. And also Stephen Stills starts to veer off a bit into Caribbean rhythms and some other things that might surprise you on here. Doesn't get the credentials it deserves. You never hear people talk about it within the CSN family or the great albums that Neil Young has done on his own, but this one fit through the cracks, and it is a hell of a mood record of this era, combining a few different ideas and genres and some really good songwriting. So check that out if you like that shit. Hopefully we kept viewers here, AB, through our run of vinyl. It's
highly doubtful, but you know, we did our best. And
it's a niche.
You know, the CSNY Ecosphere is one that I need to explore a little bit more too. I love the Crosby solo album. If I could only remember my name, that's a good album as well.
So that's a forgotten how great that one is, because it's so psychedelic and weird and has so many special guests on it of big name too.
Mm-hmm. Great album.
Good shit altogether. Aaron Bronstetter, good shit altogether. Whether we lost people or not talking music, or whether we brought them back in, thank you for sliding in for Luke Thomas, for going to bat for MK, for feeling what we're feeling here. We know you do great work on TSN. Where can we follow you, find you? What do you got going on here?
Yeah, just go to Twitter, at Aaron Bronstetter is my Twitter account, and you can find most of my output there. I know you guys have my Instagram link up. I'm not as active on Instagram as I should be. I haven't gotten into that ecosphere as much as I should have either, Brian, but you can find basically everything that I do. I try to keep on my Twitter account, and tsn.ca/UFC for all of our UFC output on TSN. And I love doing MK. I've had a great time doing it with Luke, great time doing it with you. You two guys are class acts, among the class acts in mixed martial arts journalists. So thank you for having me on.
Hey, it takes special journalists to be able to slide into what the weirdness we do here, and you fit in. Excuse me as I burp unprofessionally. You fit in perfectly. So love your work, love the interviews you put out there. Hope to see you on the road as well. I mean, you want to maybe not have given you the handsome rub so to speak. Maybe wrong choice of words, but you're one of the better dressed journalists in this game. So I'll give your songs for a Taylor. I'll give your Taylor that shout out right there. Hopefully you're not having an affair with her and she won't die young, and your solo album will be dedicated to her.
The letter's in the mail, Brian. I just got to check the mail when I get upstairs, and
yes.
I'm sure she'll have written me something lovely.
Thank you for watching this show. Follow us, like us, support us, all that stuff. Buy our merch, morningcombat.store. You can be wearing this shit. You can be drinking out of this shit. I mean, why wouldn't you want to do that? Is it the holiday season? There's probably some holiday coming up. Arbor Day or Labor Day. Buy your dad that for Labor Day. Also, check out our bonus content, youtube.com/morningcombat. Luke Thomas is on vacation. We'll be back next week. We got a great week coming for you on all things heading into. You can check out the Jared Cannonier talk ahead of the UFC on Saturday. Of course, next week, Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley. It's going to be great. Bellator Friday night, only on Showtime, 9 p.m. Eastern. Czech Congo and Sergey Karatanov are going to throw some sloppy meat hooks at each other. That should be great. Thanks for buying into everything we do here. We love you back. I don't know much about loyalty, but I got 2 words for you. For the great Aaron Bronstetter, my name is BC, and we out.
I like being the villain. I don't know how to describe it, but I'm like the good villain. I just like to troll people and have fun. I'm purposely misunderstood. This whole thing's a game. The biggest thing that drives me is making history now. Doing things that no one's ever done before and leaving an everlasting legacy. Boxing was the thing that pulled me out, gave me purpose, and made me become the best version of myself. I think the journey that I'm on now is larger than life. The flashiness of it, the business side of it, it's a chance and opportunity to create something that will be talked about in many generations to come and KO a bunch of people along the way.
Unfortunately, not all the things that happen in the world of MMA are good. A lot of them are sad. And one of the things that I want to say is we were unfortunate to lose a good person in Sal Solis, who was a coach in MMA from long ago, still coaching to this day. He was probably best known for coaching Peter Ortiz in the stand-up game for a long time. Just an outstanding human being, great guy, great sense of humor, was on The Ultimate Fighter, did all those things. At the age of 55, he lost his life to COVID. And I just want to say, Sal, for everything you did, man, you're a great man. Rest in peace, brother.
Yeah, it's always tough to lose someone that you know has been around the game a long time. You knew him, I knew him. It was just one of those things that certain things are out of control. And like, we like to make light of a lot of things on this show and have fun, but this is not something to make light of. And it's sad, especially at 55, knowing that it can happen so fast, so quick. And it's sad to see him go, and I'm sure everyone's upset. You know, his family, I wish him nothing but the best, and rest in peace.
And now, weighing in out of the blue corner, Josh the Pug Thompson. 100%. And on the other mic, he weighs in from the red corner, Big John McCarthy.
Well, are you ready for the midweek edition of the Weighing In podcast? Podcast number 174. I cannot believe we've done that many, but God, we're going to hit 1,000 coming up. I know it. Why? Because we love doing this, Josh Thompson. How are you doing there, baby?
I'm doing good. We got a lot of things going on this week, and ups and downs for both of us. I think I fly out tomorrow morning, last minute, to Sioux Falls at 4:30 in the morning. I got to catch my car to the airport. But hey, pumped. Can't wait for the fights. Logan Storley's fighting this weekend. He's always fun to watch and just a stud. He's fighting in front of his home crowd. I can't wait to watch him fight and get back down. So, hey, before we get carried on with this, so go to our YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, the little bell there on the bottom right corner as well. Notifications, that lets you know when we drop our show. All of you guys in my comment section sliding in my DMs telling me, when are you guys going to drop? Well, guess what? If you hit that bell, you don't have to reach out to me anymore. We will notify you when it happens. All right, so go ahead and do that.
You don't want people reaching out to you?
Not for something like that. Let's go. Come on, guys. This is what technology is all about. So, also, too, go down to the link below. That's our Clips channel, and hit that link there, and it will take you to our Clips channel. Hit the subscribe button there as well. We are releasing a special show that we do there. It's called Wayne Interjection. It's fun. It's quick. It's 8 to 15, 8 to 12 minutes. We'll never be longer than 15 minutes. It's specifically only allowed on our Clips channel. And you guys, it's fun. We're going to film it right after we get done doing this. You guys are going to enjoy it. That's what you guys do. You guys love us, and the crowd goes wild because we're all tall, long, and lanky. Yeah.
Oh, you just had to put it all in one thing? That's horrible.
I did it all real quick. It was perfect. Everyone's at home going, yes, he said it. I love it. All right, John. Well, hey, we got a lot of fight cards to talk about. You got PFL, you got Bellator, we got UFC. And
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it doesn't get any better.
It doesn't get any better than that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, there's so many cards, because we have a lot of fan questions we want to get to. So we're going to take probably the top 3 to 4 fights that we really want to talk about, that we really want to break down, and also tell you which fights possibly that you guys are probably sleeping on or just not familiar with the fighters. And so, look, what we do here is we talk about MMA in general. We don't just talk about the UFC. We don't just talk about Bellator. We talk about we talk about PFL. And occasionally we'll even bring up the LFA because they have a couple great fighters there as well that a lot of companies are signing or looking at right now. So let's make sure we keep our eyes out and pay attention to these young fighters that are coming up because a lot of them are going to be studs. So
those are going to be your superstars of the future.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. Okay, so let's go. Let's PFL. We'll start off with the PFL.
Well, you got to start from the top. Kayla Harrison, 10-0, Miss Double Gold. Look fantastic. Again, I got nothing bad to say about her. She's doing everything she is supposed to do. What do you say? The only thing I can say is the level of competition is not up to her standard. Not up to who she is. It's not up to her ability. And again, once again, nothing against Jenna Fabian, but just not ready for someone like Kayla Harrison as far as the experience. She's 4-1. I think most of those are in the PFL, but just don't see this being a difficult fight for Kayla. Obviously, a fight's a fight. Anything can happen, but Kayla's going to go out and do her thing. She's going to take Jenna down to the ground eventually, and she's going to pound her soft until the referee stops it, or she's going to submit her and get a tap, and it's the way it is when you're watching the PFL, and Kayla Harrison is the main event. And again, I can't say anything detrimental about her. She's doing her job. She's going and fighting the people that they're putting in front of her, and that's what she's supposed to do. And she's done it well, and she's won every fight. She's fantastic.
Yeah. No, I would absolutely agree with you. Jenna Fabian posed a little bit of a threat, and I think the threat is that she's tall, long, and lanky. So she can use those long kicks, those push kicks to the face. She can try to keep the distance as long as she can. She's got a good jab. Kayla Harrison's obviously a little bit more explosive than her that she gets from the judo background. So she does lock her hands around her or does get the over-unders or anything like that. She'll be looking for the hip toss, the foot sweeps, all those things to get the fight to the ground. And once the fight does hit the ground, it's completely out of Jenna Fabian's control. So that's the problem. Like, once this fight hits the ground, there is no answer. On the feet, Kayla Harrison can still connect, land big shots as she's coming in. She just got to be very cautious and careful moving her head off center line. And if she does that, she's able to get to the clinch. Once they get to the clinch, it won't last long on the feet. But I think Jenna Fabian's got the power. We saw that in her last fight. She's very precise with her kicks and her punches. She's good. She trains up here at CSA, or she was there at CSA. I don't know if she's still there now, but she was at CSA for a long time.
Yeah.
So
with Kieran.
With Kieran. So she's good. She's good on the feet. She's just got to learn to get up off her back. And if she can do that, but it's going to be a hard task for her to do in this fight. But 4-1 versus 10-0, the level of opponents for both of them, to be honest, has not been the highest. But I think they were supposed to meet before. But Jenna Fabian didn't make weight. And so I think that was for the finals, wasn't it? I think it was for the finals or maybe the semifinals, I think, in the last.
Might have been the semis, yeah.
The semis, I think, yeah. So anyways, she didn't make weight, but she got her weight situation under control. And I'm looking forward to this fight. I've been looking forward to this fight since a year and a half ago when they were supposed to fight. So I'm pumped. Hopefully we see a good fight.
I'm going to bring this up since Jenna Fabian kind of has the Gina Carano look and stuff like that. But did you hear the reporter who was interviewing both Kayla and Jenna at the same time, and basically talked about her looks and why would, almost like, you're a good looking, yeah, you can fight, but you're a good looking. And it was, she didn't say anything about it. She did say, you're not saying my name right. But then Kayla Harrison just tore him a new one. And I got to hand it to you. Kayla, another win. Very nice. She just tore into it. Really, I think it was kind of disrespectful. You don't ask guys if, if they're handsome or something like that. It's like, it's actually, it's true. The reason that Fabian is there is because she fights, and she fights hard, and she's a good fighter. But if you think that she's good looking, that's fine, but that's not what she's there for. She's there because she's there to fight. She's there to fight Kayla Harrison. I kind of like what Kayla did.
Look, I don't know who this person, Mills, I think is what his name was. I don't know what his name, I don't know who he is. I don't know who he works for. But the bottom line is that when he was asking his question, I don't know if he was nervous or what. He sounded like he had never watched MMA in his life.
Yeah.
First he didn't know her name. Okay, that's fine. It's not a normal spelling for Jenna. That's fine. I understand that. Okay, but then when you go on to say the things that you said, it just sounded like you're more of a fan taking questions.
Yes.
Like you were invited. That I put a little bit of that responsibility on the PFL. The PFL needs to do a better job. Not just PFL. Look, I've had problems before in the past. The UFC had done it. Strikeforce had definitely done it. Bellator has done it a couple times. We've got to vet the media a little bit better in terms of who.
Tell me about it. Some of the interviews I have to do, and I go, why was I talking to that person?
Yeah, we have no idea, because they have no idea about the sport. Even the people doing the interviews, not just about MMA, just about anything, And so it just really bugs me that these whoever the company is, like the PFL in this situation, they need to vet their media a little bit better, because this guy Mills or whatever, he sounded like a fan. He just sounded like a fan that wanted to get in there and ask questions, and I'm not even sure what did it go to his website that maybe has 1,000 people that are listening and watching. It just didn't sound right, didn't come across right. Now look, this is what the issue. Like, I understand where you're coming from, but in all fairness, I have been asked a couple times. I'm sure Luke Rockhold has as well. It's like, hey, how come you guys are not models? How come you guys decided to fight? So yes, to answer Kayla Harrison's question, yes, guys get asked that question as well. But I do understand where she was coming from.
But you were asked to be a sock model. There's a difference, dude.
Nah.
It's your feet.
That's true. No, if you saw my feet, you wouldn't have said that. So
goddamn Flintstone feet for a small guy.
Yeah, I was more of an ear model, though. That's kind of what this cauliflower it worked out perfectly.
Oh, Randy Couture, man, he got a whole ear modeling thing with Nike.
Jeez,
give it up to him.
That's so funny. But no, in reality, but guys have been asked that question. I mean, look at guys like Alan Jobon. Kid's absolutely good-looking guy. There's other guys. Rockhold, of course, is at the top of the list. And I mean, there's other guys. I know there's fighters. That have been asked probably that question. You're a good-looking guy. You're this, and so I don't want to take it that far, but I do understand, especially the way that this guy Mills put it. I understand exactly why Kayla Harrison said what she said.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the card. What fights on here stand out to you?
Well, Janelle.
I know Jamel Jones. Yep.
And I've watched Bruno Capoloza many times. You're talking just a complete contrast of style. You got one guy that's a wrestler. One guy likes to knock people out. Capoloza, I've watched him in Ryzen. I've watched him in the PFL also. He loves to stand up. He's got heavy hands. And he's not easy to take down. And he is in good shape. One thing that he is able to do is go deep into some fights, get guys that are trying to take him down, get him winded. So we'll see how Jones does. You're the one that knows him better than I do. What do you think?
Well, look, Jones is somebody that he's very explosive. He likes to throw the heavy hands to get into the takedown. Once he gets on top, though, he's heavy and he's got great ground and pound. He's got heavy hands and great ground and pound. But the situation is his submission defense is not great. He powers out of a lot of things. But he's a talented young fighter. I've known him for a long time. He used to train with Trevor Prengley up in Idaho. He wrestled out of North Idaho College. He's explosive. The fight IQ is not always there. He uses mainly off of a lot of aggression. He's gotten a lot better, though, as of recently in terms of tempering down that aggression and staying focused and trying to increase his fight IQ. But at the end of the day, he's got to make sure that he gets his fight to the ground. So I don't know how good Bruno's takedown defense is, but it's going to have to be good. The one thing with Jamel Jones, he does tend to slow down as the fight goes on because he does use a lot of strength and he's a lot of explosiveness. And we've seen that from a lot of fighters that are powerful and are explosive. They tend to slow down as the fight goes on. So he's going to have to make sure that he controls that aggression and and he's picking and choosing his shots in his ground and pound and not just flailing about, and with shots that are not landing and being effective. So if he does get on top, it's going to be a long night for Bruno. I can tell you that. That's one thing I know.
Yeah, and the same thing if he doesn't get Bruno out of there and he doesn't do a lot of damage on the ground, Bruno's got a pretty good gas tank. Heavyweights just are not known for having good gas tanks, and when a guy can go hard for those 3 rounds. That's a tough one. So we'll see. It could be that he gets him down and he takes him out of it. It could be that he is wasting a lot of energy in that and cannot survive. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
What other fights on this card strike you down?
Well, I love Caitlin Young has been around forever.
Mm-hmm.
She's fighting Marina Mokankina.
I love that
name.
I've
had to say
it a couple times. Jeez.
But
just brutal.
Again, a real contrast in style because Caitlin was always more of a stand-up fighter, got good with the submissions, and Marina is very good with the submissions.
Yes.
She goes after all kinds of different techniques. She's good with her leg lock, great with arm bars. She's got a very good submission game. Her stand-up game, I don't think can stay with Caitlin. Keep it on the feet. I think Caitlin keeps her up in the stand-up. But it'll be an interesting fight to watch.
Yeah, I think if Marina gets to the top position, she'll be able to threaten a lot of submissions as well as do some damage. She's got a pretty good gas tank, though. I was surprised on how good her gas tank was for how much effort she was putting out to get the fights to the ground. She's not afraid to stand. She just chooses to crush that distance. She's either all the way in the pocket, kind of trying to dirty box you and knee you and keep you to the fence and get takedowns, or she's all the way out. She does a lot of circling, which that's why I was surprised that she was able to, her gas tank was able to withstand for the full 3 rounds. She's tough. She's tough. She's got a little bit of power in the hands, but everything is for her to lead herself into that takedown. I think with Young, she just got to make sure that she's not standing directly in front of her to make it easy for the takedown, and I think she's got a good chance of piecing her up, though, on the feet.
Yeah, so do I. I think on the feet, even though I'll give it, Marina actually improved a ton from when I first saw her, and she was in Fight Night Global, and then she came to Bellator, and then her last fight, she actually did well in the stand-up. She has really improved in that category. I just don't think she's improved enough to stay with Caitlin if she doesn't get in close and take her down pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, I don't really see any of the other fights on this card that I'm too hot on. You've got 2 girls that are 0-0, and then you've is there more fights on this card?
Well, the real problem is Larissa Pacheco's on the card. She's a good fighter, 15-4 record. She's tough. She has fought against Kayla, and she's lost. She's going against Taylor Gordado, and Taylor's 2-1. That's pretty tough when you're taking a fighter which will be their 20th pro fight and putting them against someone who's in their 4th, especially when that person with the 20 pro fights is actually good. I'm like, damn, man, whoever is putting this one and allowing this one, that's not the kind that you really want. Someone had to talk somebody into something.
John, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Are promotions wasting their time?
Deva makes bold choices.
I gotta be very careful how I say this. Are promotions wasting their time? If they're not the UFC, are promotions wasting their time having female fights right now? Because there's just not enough active female fighters that have evolved to that level of the highest level. I mean, you have Invicta, you've got PFL, you've got Bellator, you've got UFC, you've got, we've got one. Like right now, the level of top level female fighters is really, you have like the UFC, and sure, you've got a lot that are in Bellator, and you've got a couple in the PFL, and you've got a couple in one, but they're not there's not a lot of them. So they're
talented. But see what you're talking about here, look at the PFL in whatever, decision they made and whoever came up with it. It was because of Kayla.
Yeah.
Kayla was in that position. She was a larger lady, and 155 was the weight class that she wanted to be in because she felt like I can't get to 145.
Which she has, though.
Yes, she has. And the real problem is, there's a ton of really good women fighters that are in that. There's not a ton that are in the 105 atom weight just because that's pretty small. But you get into the 115 straw weight, there's a lot. You get into the 125 flyweight, there is a ton. That is stacked with a ton of good fighters. 135, the bantamweights has got a ton. You get into the 145, the featherweight, it starts to tail off. There's just not as much talent because you just don't get as many women of that size that are fighting and wanting to fight. And then you all of a sudden start one at 155. There's no one there. And that's the real problem. You're trying to create these people to come, and a lot of them are women that have fought at bantamweight or featherweight, and they're moving up because they want the opportunity, but they're just not in a position to fight at 155 pounds and be successful, and there's just not that many of them. So I think with, to say, should the UFC, change anything? No, they're doing fine. In fact, you take a look at their featherweights, there's nobody there.
Yeah,
they don't even have anybody really. Hardly. They got a couple ladies there, but Bellator's got some. Invicta's got a lot that are what we're talking. Those are the ones coming up, and they're going to be the next generation. But when you're talking 155, nobody's got anything, and even the PFL, they've got Kayla, and she's a stud, but there's just not a whole lot else out there at that weight class.
Yeah, this is the only fight that they really have that they have not been able to put together is Jenna Fabian and Kayla Harrison. Yeah. Like these are the two that I think Jenna Fabian is probably the number 2 girl, that they've had on the roster.
I think Larissa is better than Jenna.
You think so?
Yeah, if they fought, I say Larissa wins.
They haven't fought though.
Nope.
Dave, can you click on Jenna Fabian?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
No, that's one I don't believe that it's at.
No. All right, well, maybe we'll see that fight next.
Yeah.
Who knows?
We're already saying, oh, Kayla wins.
Yeah.
It's all right.
We'll see. All right.
Look,
okay.
Let's be honest. Kayla's a huge favorite.
Yeah.
Huge favorite in this.
Yeah. This fight's going to hit the ground. It's going to hit the ground.
It comes back to the old days. You can sit there and say, how many times have you watched a boxer come in and do well with just boxing in MMA? And I'm not saying that, Jenna has just boxing. I'm not saying that, but that is her best skill set, is her hands.
Yeah.
So
she's got good kicks. She hides them pretty well behind her hands, and she's gotten better after working all that time at CSA with Kieran and them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, but I would have to agree with you. Her boxing is definitely her best attribute.
Yeah.
Best talent. All right, so let's
we'll be watching
Bellator.
Thursday.
Yes, we will.
We will.
Once I get off the plane. All right. All right, let's jump into the Bellator stuff.
All right. Which one you want to talk about, baby?
Do you want to talk about the main event?
No.
Okay. Look, you have Czech and you've got Karatanov. Look, the two heavyweights, they're going to get after it. I think Czech takes him down. I think Czech lays on him and beats him up for a couple rounds until the ref stops it.
Unless Sergey can come in and use his jab to just set up the uppercut that he throws so well. He lands that, he'll knock anyone out. He's got cinder blocks in his hands. He just is not fast anymore. And Czech has been able to squash a lot of people with, he's got a good clinch game, and he beats people up in the clinch. He wears them out, and because he's in good shape.
Yeah, for 44 years old or whatever, he's
46.
46. He's still in phenomenal shape.
Crazy. Yep.
Jeez, man. Jeez.
But I just don't know where it goes from there with either guy. I'm just being honest. I know Czech feels that he'll be in a position to have a championship fight. That's not coming because you've got, Moldavsky, is the interim, and you've got Bader sitting in the other. So Moldavsky's not going to fight him. That does nothing for him. He's going to wait for Bader. So it's just he's going to be older, and I just don't see it happening. I don't know.
Let me ask you a question. What you have a number one contender spot right now? J.J. Wilson and Adam Boric. That right there is to see who is the number one contender to fight for the title next.
Thank you.
I mean, I really believe that. Why is that not the main event? That's one.
Tell
Two
me.
is, look, guys, I don't know. That's why I'm freaking asking you. I don't know. There's that. And then you've got Logan Storley, he's got one loss, who is now to the current champion, to Yaroslav Amosov, who's still undefeated at 26-0. And it was a fucking barn burner of the fight. And this is his hometown. This is where he's from. He's from South Dakota. Like, he's all and we have him number 3 on there. He should have been the co-main event. Give the guy his due. He's going to probably be next for the title shot with a win here, and then whoever wins this next fight coming up. I think it's going to be. I think you're going to end up seeing Jason Jackson and Logan Storley fight to see who fights the winner of, and then MVP and what's his name? MVP.
The only problem
Lima.
is Jason Jackson and Logan Storley
are teammates.
The same camp.
Yeah, but they're gonna have to do it. I
agree.
Yeah, I think they're gonna have to do it. So, I don't know. I mean, I honestly believe there's just no way that I don't know how many guys are gonna be able to beat Logan Storley. I mean,
he's on. Look, I look at it this way: Logan Storley. Not everyone's wrestling transfers into MMA.
Yeah.
Well, you'll get guys that they were great wrestlers, but their wrestling in MMA doesn't transfer the same way. Logan Storley, dude, his wrestling has transferred beautifully. Now, he may not have been the NC2A champion, out of Minnesota, but he was a great wrestler. And I'll tell you what, his wrestling in MMA, you want to go back and watch when Kamaru Usman and Logan Storley used to, wrestle off on each other at Sanford MMA. Stand by. You'll see who is the dominant guy. There's nobody in that camp that is better than Logan Storley when it comes to the wrestling part. He's just got a grind to him, a strength. Everything he does just starts to overwhelm the guys inside the cage if he's fighting, or the guys that he's training with. And now his stand-up has gotten good. He was doing really well in the stand-up against Amosov in that 3rd round. And yes, he lost the fight on a split decision, but I think he learned a ton from that. He had hurt himself early in the fight, and I think what he got out of just the experience of fighting Amosov is going to pay huge dividends for him in the future as he goes on. I think he's just going to be a much better fighter. Everybody that's going to have to face him is now going to face someone who has now just stepped up that to the next level. He's good, dude.
Yeah, he's really good. I wasn't too high on him until I saw him fight Amosov, because I always felt like if you fought someone that could stuff takedowns, then he was stuck on his feet, and I didn't think he would know what to do in terms of having to bite down on the mouthpiece and just have to swing for it. And in that 3rd round, that fight could have went either way. And that 3rd round, he proved me wrong. I mean, it wasn't so much he proved me wrong. He just showed me what he had. He was the guy
he has that skill set, and he has the heart.
Yep, he has it. Yep. Now, look, he needs to obviously work a lot more on the stand-up in terms of adding more things to it, the kicks, the knees, all those things, adding the elbows. That's going to come with time, but he's never going to get away from what he does best, because he's had such success with it throughout his whole career. I want to say he's a six-time state champ for South Dakota.
He was a state champion as a 7th grader.
That's nuts. That's absolutely nuts. Crazy. 7th grade state champ. That's insane. Yeah. So there's that.
7th grader taking on seniors from high school.
Yeah. He's a multiple-time All-American. He's a stud. He's an absolute stud. He's very soft-spoken, and he's a good fighter, and I used to kind of ride hard on him a little bit because, I get more around I wrap my head around you as being marketable. And at the time, he had some controversial stuff said after the interview or after the fight, and in one of his wins, he had said like, "Hey guys, you guys can boo me all you want. I'm going to keep doing what I do and just keep winning." And I'm like, that's not how you win fans. No. There's other ways to approach it. But he doesn't have that personality. He has the personality of like, "Hey, I'm here to win. I'm here to be the best." And that's it. And I can appreciate that as well. So I kind of leaned away from him a little bit, but then when I saw him in there against Amosov, he fucking won me over, man. He won every bit of me over. I was like, this kid is a stud. Everything about him he's a stud. He's a winner. There's no doubt about it. He's a winner. And so, and then him fighting here in his home, basically in his home state, his hometown area. I think he's from Mitchell, which is right outside of Sioux Falls. And that's where Mike Miller was born as well. He used to play for the Miami Heat and stuff. So, but yeah, he's a talented fighter. He's got a good fight. That's gonna be a great fight as well. Danny Shiro. So Dante Shiro, yeah.
Dante Shiro.
So there's that fight. Look, we skipped over the Adam Borks and JJ Wilson fight a little bit. We grazed over it to get to Logan. But this is going to be like I said, it's a number one contender spot. It's to see who's going to end up fighting for the title, I think, after the next fight. So whoever's fighting next, there's going to be that fight next. I think the winner of this has that chance. They're going to see which one's going to end up fighting AJ McKee. If AJ McKee stays at 45, which this is, to me, I need to see this. See, that's the thing, is I need to see AJ McKee fight somebody like this. And I know he just beat Patricio, and we talked about how damn good Patricio is, but I want to see him fight a young up and comer, a hungry person, someone like an Adam Borch or a JJ Wilson. And I want to say someone that's very much your size, by the way. Both these guys they're very tall, they're very long, they're very lanky, they're